All right, we talk a lot about offense. It's been the big conversation topic ever since Saturday's game, the season opening win over Kent State at Acrisure Stadium. We talked a lot about the offense in the post-game show. We talked a lot about the offense in the Morning Pitt on Monday. We talked a lot about the offense in the Morning Pitt yesterday. Got to switch it up a little bit and talk a little bit about Pitt's defense, because anecdotally, by the feel of things, it didn't feel like the defense played great. And yet, by the numbers were really good for Pitt's defense. So, which is it? Did Pitt's defense play well against Kent State? Did they not play well against Kent State? Is the answer right in the middle? You can already guess that I'm going to say it's right in the middle, because that's what I always say. But what do we need to know about this defense? What does this defense need to do better heading into week 2 in this trip to Cincinnati on Saturday? Let's talk a little Pitt defense here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, it's Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Try not to waste too much of your time here at the beginning of the video, but we do have to give a little bit of an intro just to tell you what's going on and ask you our call to action, right? You have to have a call to action. So my call to action to you is to like this video and subscribe to YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe button is right down there. You can see the like button, the little thumbs up down there, and once you subscribe, you can turn on notifications so you get an alert right here anytime we go live or post new content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our live show tonight, our weekly Panther-Lair show at 8:30 p.m. this evening, and so Jim Hammett and I will get together to talk with you for about a little bit of Pitt sports. We have our post-game shows that are always fun. We'll have that on Saturday night after the Cincinnati game, just like we did after the Kent State game this past weekend, just like after every game this season, even the Syracuse game, Thursday night primetime game. We'll go live right here at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to give you a live post-game show. And I don't know if anybody else will be up, but we'll be up talking about Pitt sports. So we do it all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to never miss any of our Pitt video content. And then, of course, we have the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. All day, every day, Pitt fans are hanging out on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com talking about Pitt sports and what's going on, and you want to be there too. Panther-Lair.com. All right, defense. Let's talk a little defense. All right, this Pitt defense gave up 3 touchdowns to Kent State. Kent State finished with, 2 touchdowns to Kent State, right? You'd think I would know this number off the top of my head. Yeah, 2 receiving touchdowns. They gave up 2 touchdowns. Yeah, because they scored 24 points. They had a field goal and scored a touchdown on the muffed punt, the punt fumble by Kanate Mumfield. So gave up 2 touchdowns. And here's the thing, and I said it right at the start. I think there were plenty of times in that game where you felt like the defense wasn't playing very well. And certainly, I think if you heard Pat Narduzzi's comments after the game, he didn't seem to think the defense played very well. And so your overall impression, and I think a lot of people coming out of this game, it was a fairly common sentiment of, I'm worried about the defense. And I had the same thought too, still do to some extent, although there's a little bit of nuance added to it. But, I had the same thought too coming out of the game of like, defense shows some holes. There's some issues out there. But then you look at the stats. All right, and I know there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I know numbers cannot always tell the tale, but think about these numbers. 15 first downs gained. All right, that seems like a low number. I'd have to compare that. But 212 yards of total offense. Start right there. And we're going to talk about how the defense played. They gave up 212 yards. No, I was shocked when I saw that number after the game. I was like, wait, only 212 yards? Seriously? I would have guessed it was far more than that. I don't know if I would have guessed it was like 400, but I would have guessed that it was more than 212. That put Pitt, I think, in the top 30 nationally in total defense, yards allowed per game. And you would break it down on a per play basis. They allowed 3.2 yards per play because those 212 yards were gained on 66 offensive plays. 3.2 yards per play, actually ranks inside the top 25 nationally. Okay? Third downs. They allowed 3 third down conversions on 16 attempts. That ranks inside the top 20 nationally, that third down conversion percentage. They had 5 sacks. They got 2 turnovers. Red zone wise, they only they actually only let Kent State get into the red zone once, which, yes, Kent State scored a field goal on that drive. So actually this is a double win here. Like, the red zone stat is a great stat for Pitt's defense because Kent State scored once on a red zone drive, and it was a field goal. So when they got into the red zone, Pitt's defense stopped them and didn't allow them to score a touchdown. That's a win for the defense. And on top of that, they only allowed Kent State to drive into the red zone once. When you look drive by drive at this game, Kent State, and I think we talked about this a little bit after the game, Kent State had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Let me 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 drives, other than like end of half possessions. 11 drives. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them ended in punts. 2 more ended in turnovers, and 1 ended in a turnover on downs. I mean, that's pretty effective play. 3 and out, 2 3 and outs, 3, 4, 5, 6 3 and outs, 7 3 and outs, basically, on these drives. Like, this is effective defense. You know, I mean, all of these stats, if we had put any of these in front of you and said, did that defense play well? You would have said yes. So why is it that we came away with this feeling that the defense didn't play well? And it really comes down to just a couple drives. Kent State kind of controlled the third quarter. Time of possession-wise, they had the ball for 11 minutes and 49 seconds in the third quarter. And Kent State ended up winning the time of possession in the game largely because of the second half. They had the 11:49 in the third quarter, 8:42 in the fourth quarter after Pitt won the first half pretty solidly in time of possession. Now, time of possession is not something we think that this offense is going to really put a lot of value on. I don't expect Pitt's offense to be aiming for time of possession or trying to run those numbers up. So they'll probably lose time of possession in most games. But in this Kent State game, it was really a matter of the second half and what the defense did in the second half. And that's what annoyed Panthers the most. He was still talking about it on Monday, talking about the beginning of the third quarter, how they came out of halftime, and he was annoyed about it. So what happened when they came out of halftime? Well, it went well at the start. Kent State threw 2 incomplete passes on first and second down and then got 9 yards on third down against Pitt's Delta defensive package. 4th and 1 at the 34, trailing 28-14 on 4th and 1 at the 24. Kent State goes for it, hands the ball off, gains 2 yards, gets a fresh set of downs. Now Pitt gets into trouble because they give up a 9-yard run on the next first down. From there, it's pretty easy to convert 3rd and 1. Next first down, almost at midfield, they give up an 11-yard pass. Now they're in Pitt territory. 3-yard run on first down, then they give up a 9-yard pass on second down. Then 1st and 10 from the 29 is when they throw the touchdown pass against P.J. O'Brien. Now, this was the one that looked like it might have been bobbled a little bit. And I think it might have, but the officials ruled it was a touchdown, and it stood as a touchdown, and now all of a sudden you're in a 1-touchdown game in the second half. It's 28-21. Now, 3 plays later, Desmond Reed would run for a 46-yard touchdown and make it 14 points again, but on the very next drive, Kent State goes down. They drive... how many yards? 57 yards and kick a field goal. Now, this was the drive. This field goal drive was the drive when it looked like Key Thompson had an interception, but it ended up that he was bobbling. Look, you have to practice those plays like, baseball players practice pop-ups. Somebody has to call it. When the ball is flying up in the air and there's 3 defenders around, somebody has to call it, and the other 2 guys need to get out of their way so that it's, doesn't happen what ended up happening. But they score there. That was 2 of Kent State's long drives. They only had 3 long drives. There was a touchdown drive on their second possession when they went 75 yards. the touchdown drive on the first possession of the second half when they went 75 yards, and then that field goal drive when they went 57 yards. No other possession in the game was longer than 31 yards, and really, that was, the other two possessions in the second half where they went 31 yards and 28 yards. Everything else, 3, 2, -5, -7, -3, -12, -5. So all of these possessions where they lost yards, but these 3 drives, 2 touchdowns and a field goal, were a bit concerning. Now, you run into a tough situation in a game like this, right? You want perfection, particularly out of your defense. You want your defense to be perfect and not give up anything. You want to give up 212 yards and no touchdowns. If you came out of it with 212 yards and maybe only 1 touchdown, plus the 2 turnovers and the really bad third down conversion, like all those things, I think you'd feel better if you didn't have 2 drives like that. But it even goes beyond there, because I think one of the biggest concerns that Pitt fans have coming out of it, and probably the Pitt coaches, although, we talked to Narduzzi on Monday, we talked to Tim Dowse, the defensive line coach, yesterday, and nobody really voiced this. They seemed happy with what they saw or thought it was fine. But, a big part of the problem, and this was a concern coming into the season, was pressure and creating pressure. And did they get enough pressure? According to Pro Football Focus, there were 14 pressures by Pitt's defense in that game. The Kent State quarterback, Devin Cargman, dropped, let me just get his drop back numbers. Dropped back 33 times. So he was pressured on 14 out of 33 dropbacks. So a little less than half. I don't think that's terrible. You'd obviously like to have a little bit more than that, but I don't think that's awful in terms of pressure. But part of the problem was where the pressure was coming from. So when you look at Pro Football Focus, you look at the pressure numbers for Pitt's defense. Nate Matlack had 3 pressures. That was the most on the team. And then a whole bunch of guys had 1 pressure each. Along the defensive line, Sincere Edwards had 1 pressure, Isaiah Neal had 1 pressure, Jimmy Scott had 1 pressure, Chief Borders had 1, Nakai Johnson had 1, and that's it. So Johnson, Borders, Scott, Neal, Edwards, Matlack. So 6 of the defensive linemen, I think they played 12 total, 6 out of the 12 defensive linemen had a pressure at some point in the game, but none of them other than Matlack had more than 1. Like I say, Pitt finished with 5 sacks in the game. Kyle Lewis had 1. Rasheem Biles had 1. Brandon George had 1. Nate Matlack had 1. And Chief Borders and Isaiah Neal had each had a .5 sacks. So the first thing that probably jumps out to you there is the first 3 names I said, which was Lewis, Biles, and George. And here's a concern that I have, and this wasn't a concern in previous years, and it was a strength in previous years. Actually, the fact that this wasn't the case. Kyle Lewis gets a sack, Rasheem Biles gets a sack, Brandon George gets a sack. Some of those probably came on third down in the Delta defensive package, where it's a pressure package, and they're bringing pressure from different places, and that's a place where they're going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. But some of those came out of the base defense. And I think if you're Pitt, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have to blitz in your base defensive look. You want to be able to get pressure with your front 4, just rushing 4. You're not always going to be able to do it. You're going to have times where you have to send a 5th guy or send a 6th guy. And certainly, like I said, in those third down passing situations, the Delta defensive package, that's going to be part of it, that you're going to send extra rushers. But you don't want to have to do that out of your base defense. You want to be able to get that push and the pressure up front from your front 4 in the base defense. Now, they did get some tackles for loss. Sincere Edwards had 1.5 tackles for loss. Nakai Johnson had a tackle for loss. Matlack, like I mentioned. Then Jimmy Scott, Chief Borders, Jasir Whittington, and Thomas Aiden all had 0.5 tackles for loss. So, I mean, they got a little bit there. But you really need to be able to get that pressure from your defensive linemen. And this was one of the biggest question marks around this team coming into the season. This was one of the biggest concerns, was how the defensive line would play this year. Not just losing Charlie Partridge, the coach, but all the personnel. Deion Hayes and Sam Okunlola and DeAndre Jules, plus all the guys who just naturally ran out of eligibility. Now, those guys weren't necessarily all that productive, but I think you definitely felt the loss of Hayes, Okunlola, and Jules in Saturday's game, regardless of what those guys might have produced at their new schools. And I know, Deion Hayes, I think, had a tackle for loss and also had an offside penalty, so he might have counterbalanced his yards gained and yards lost there. And maybe Okunlola didn't do a lot, or Jules, I think, had a big play. But look, your defensive line would be better with those guys than without. And now you've got all these new faces. You've got Nate Matlack playing in a different kind of role, and you've got Chief Borders playing in a different kind of role, and you've got a bunch of new faces at defensive tackle. And this was all a big concern coming into the season of, like, how would these guys do? How would they handle moving into different roles and moving into prominent roles? And I don't know if the first game was all that encouraging. I liked the linebackers. I liked how they played. There were obviously some coverage issues in the secondary. The safeties maybe were a bit. It's funny because I hyped up Kyle Lewis so much, and I think Pro Football Focus put him down for like a team high four missed tackles. I think he still played really well, and he had 10 tackles total in the game, a game high 10 tackles, but they put him down for 4 missed tackles, which sort of tracks. I felt like he did miss some plays out there, and obviously there were a couple coverage things that you got to watch out for, and Cincinnati. Their quarterback had a productive day against Towson last weekend, so they're going to look to attack. They're going to look to try to take some shots downfield. They're going to look to try to get vertical on Pitt's defense. It's going to be about that offensive line, which is a veteran group for Cincinnati, holding up against Pitt's pass rush. And then conversely, it's going to be about Pitt not having to send blitzers all the time just to try to create pressure. I don't think they want to do that. I think they want their linebackers to be involved in coverage and going downfield and making plays that way. And then, occasionally rushing when they're not in that Delta defensive package. But if you can't get pressure up front from 4 guys, then you have to send extra guys. And now you're putting yourself probably in a position you don't want to be in, because if they pick up that blitz, now you really don't have any protection downfield. And you could find yourself giving up some big plays. And this is a concern. But it all stems from those guys up front. And I think Sincere Edwards made some plays. I think Nick James looks interesting and has some real potential there. Nate Matlack got the sack, but I mean, he's going to have to be a lot more impactful going forward than he was on Saturday. I think Jimmy Scott seems like a nice player, but again, going to have to be more impactful. And just overall, that group is going to have to get into the backfield more than they did against Kent State, because it really does affect the whole defense. And I think Cincinnati does want to take shots downfield. Those are going to be easier to do if Pitt's pass rush is not getting home. So that's the biggest concern. I think most people would probably agree about that, and for good reason, because I think that group left something to be desired playing against an opponent that is not going to be the toughest opponent they face all season. I think these next 2 weeks, obviously, Cincinnati and West Virginia will be tougher opponents than Kent State. And so if you struggle getting pressure on Kent State, what's going to happen against Cincinnati? So you need those week 1 to week 2 improvements that coaches always like to talk about. You got to get better from week 1 to week 2. Well, this is that time. And I think nowhere is it more important than along the defensive line. So if they can go out and only give up 212 yards again and hold the opponent to, what was the rushing total? Like 31 rushing yards, 30 net yards on the ground. Yeah, 31 net rushing yards, 212 total yards, 3 third down conversions, 5 sacks, 2 turnovers. If you do that, you're probably going to have a really good chance to win. I don't know if it'll necessarily, because, I mean, yeah, they gave up 24 points, but again, 7 of those came on the fumbled punt. So, defensively, they gave up 17 with 2 turnovers, 212 yards, 3 third down conversions, 31 rushing. Like, if you put up numbers similar to that at Cincinnati on Saturday, you're going to be in great shape. Can they do that against Cincinnati on Saturday? I don't know. We'll find out on Saturday. And then we'll talk about it after the game right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Listen, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Subscribe button is right down there. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all your Pitt sports coverage. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's been a lot of fun. As always, we have our live show tonight at 8:30, so make sure you tune in for that conversation. I look forward to it. And, yeah. Have a great, what day is this? Wednesday. Have a great Wednesday. We'll catch up with you tonight for the live stream, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.